Why is it so hard to learn a new skill sometimes? You probably remember a time when you set out to learn a new skill and it came to you easily. You still had to practice, but somehow practicing and even failing was fun because you knew you were making real progress and getting better constantly. But then there are times when you were trying to learn something and it was just confusing and frustrating. You were trying hard but didn't really get anywhere and gave up eventually. This guy studied decision making at the University of Chicago and he figured something out. There are two types of environments when it comes to learning any new skill. One he called kind, and the other one he called wicked. In a kind environment, learning is simple and fun. You know what to do and how to get better. A wicked environment is the opposite. Learning a new skill is hard or even impossible. It's confusing and you don't even know if you're getting better or not. So if you compare these environments side by side, you will see that in a kind environment, it's easier to be fully engaged or in the zone and experience a state of flow, while in the wicked one, you will usually be frustrated. Also, in the kind environment, you will have a steep learning curve and quickly improve, while in the wicked one, you will improve very slowly, if at all. Third, with a lot of deliberate practice, you will be able to develop true expertise in a kind environment, while in a wicked one, you can't really ever get to that point. So why is it easy to learn something in one environment and difficult in the other? What's the difference between the two? We can break down a learning environment into 6 factors: goals, rules, feedback, patterns, complexity, and mistakes. In a kind environment, goals are clear and well defined. In the wicked one, they are ambiguous, change frequently, and sometimes even contradict one another. The patterns are either clear, regular, and repetitive, so that you can learn to predict what happens next, or they aren't, and what happens seems very random. An environment can be very simple when problems are straightforward or can be broken down into simpler steps, or they can be complex systems of interrelated variables that are difficult to see through. When the rules in an environment are stable, you can trust that your actions will always have the same results, and you can therefore predict the future to some degree. When the rules can suddenly change, however, you may get different results while still doing the same thing. When mistakes have only little negative consequences, you can treat these consequences as feedback and just learn from them. So you aren't afraid to try things and make mistakes. If the consequences of a mistake are very serious, on the other hand, you might not try anything new. And if you do, you might fail so hard that you cannot try again. Then lastly, there's feedback. Is it accurate and immediate? So you can see why you were right or wrong and change your approach accordingly, or is the feedback delayed, inconsistent, misleading, or is it just missing altogether? It's not always obvious, so the biggest danger is thinking you're in a kind environment just because you can read the signs, but in reality, you're not. Take the example of investing in stocks. Someone might see patterns in the charts believing he can now predict what happens next. But those patterns don't have anything to do with the underlying causes of market movements. So basing decisions on them is about as effective as basing them on astrology. He might also think he's getting accurate feedback. This was a good decision because the price went up after I bought it. But as long as he doesn't know why it went up, he didn't really learn anything. He just thinks that he did. And this is true for many other things than investing as well. Because typically, only games are kind learning environments, and real life is a wicked one. If you look at the goals in a game, they are very well defined. In Tetris, you want to fit the blocks, clear the lines, and avoid reaching the top of the screen. In real life, you often have conflicting goals of work, health, relationships, or just trying to study, but also wanting to check Instagram. The patterns in games are generally very repetitive. Once again, in Tetris you can only get one of 7 different blocks. But in a real-life example like investing, the patterns can be very erratic and unpredictable. When it comes to complexity, games are structured in a way to never overwhelm you, but instead always provide you with a challenge that matches your current skill level. But real life doesn't care. It's complex, interconnected systems of nature, economy, social factors, and so on. The rules in games are also stable. Each round of Go, checkers, or chess has the exact same rule set. But in real life, somebody can change the rules, like implementing a new policy in the workplace, for example. When you make a mistake in a game and you lose, you can just restart and try again. But in real life, you might end up in jail or dead. Games provide you with a steady flow of feedback, like a high score and a progress or a health bar. But in real life, understanding cause and effect can feel like asking a crystal ball. So naturally, the next question is, how can we make a wicked environment into a kinder one? Well, first you need to understand that no environment is either completely kind or wicked. Firstly, environments can differ on each of the 6 factors. So while the goals might be more clear, the patterns might still be chaotic and the feedback might still be confusing. Secondly, all of those differences exist on a spectrum. So it's possible to change the clarity of the goals and all of the other factors as well. Let's take another look at our example, investing. This is usually a very wicked learning environment. The goal is actually quite clear. You need to make more money than you lose. The patterns, however, are very chaotic, especially in the short term. You can't ever be sure what happens next. The complexity is extremely high because there are thousands of instruments like ETFs, CFDs, different asset classes, and so on. Not only that, but a myriad of different variables like fear and greed, policies, changes in consumer preferences influence the prices, and so on. The rules change as soon as laws change, or the competition innovates, or something unexpected happens, like a pandemic or war breaking out. Mistakes in investing normally won't kill you, but if you use leverage or don't know what you're doing, you will end up broke, or even with a lot of debt. The feedback is often misleading because the market reacts to all sorts of things like the news, and even if you can explain afterwards why something happened, this doesn't help you predict what's going to happen next time. But there is a way to make even very wicked environments like investing more kind, so you can actually learn from your mistakes and win in the long term. What would someone who is clearly good at investing, let's say like Charlie Munger, do to make this environment kinder and therefore make it easier to learn? Well, even the goals can be made more clear by focusing on a specific time period, the long term, and making it a priority to not lose any money to benefit from the compound effect. The inconsistent patterns of the market can be mitigated by focusing on only a few key principles, like only investing in businesses whose intrinsic value exceeds the market value, because it's unlikely to lose money on those deals. Instead of chasing the newest trends and complicated financial instruments, Mr. Munger would probably recommend just staying within your circle of competence. This reduces the perceived complexity for you and gives you an advantage since you already know your way around. While many rules can change, some things don't. A rule of long-term returns is that a business needs a moat to be defensible. So he would probably only focus on businesses with a clear moat. Mistakes can't be avoided, but in order to reduce their impact, he would say to always have a margin of safety and, of course, never invest more than you can afford to lose. In order to gain accurate feedback, he wouldn't read any Reddit posts, but rather cross-check what's happening with his many mental models that are based on very fundamental principles that he knows are true. And whenever the data contradicts those models, he knows there must be something wrong. So the great thing is that this method can be applied to pretty much any skill and improve your learning speed, even with skills that are already in a kind environment. To sum it all up, there are wicked and kind learning environments. It's hard to learn anything in a wicked environment. Real-life situations are usually wicked. There are always ways to make them more kind, though. And in order to try it out for yourself, just pick a skill you want to learn and follow the steps in the Google Sheet I linked in the description.